Every boyfriend I get is brutally dying. Now I know the truth about them. And me. It's me, Brianna, not you. That's what my latest boyfriend told me before walking directly into the path of a truck. There was barely anything of him, just enough to peel off of the sidewalk. I thought our relationship was going well. It's not like I'm desensitized to my boyfriends dying or ceasing to exist, but it's almost become the norm. Ben was my first boyfriend in high school and my longest relationship to date. Fluffy-haired Ben with his dimpled grin and freckles. He was the type of guy who should have been popular, but chose to keep to himself. I met him in the principal's office. Ben was being lectured for sneaking around, and I was handing in a late assignment. All he did was wink at me, and I fell. Hard. We dated for 2 years, and I really thought he was the one. Ben told me he loved me, and every Friday he introduced me to a new restaurant. I was in love. I loved everything about him. On the night before our senior prom, a drunk driver T-boned my boyfriend's car, killing him instantly. After his funeral, it's like he stopped existing. His parents left town, and every time I mentioned him, my parents would slowly tilt their heads and act confused when I brought him up. My brother was the worst for it, considering he and Ben were best friends. But he just looked at me with this weird fucking look in his eye, like his soul had been ripped out. Eyes are the windows to the soul, apparently, and my brother's soul was MIA. Ben, his expression crumpled. Wait, who? Alex was my emotional support, who later became someone closer. Funny Alex. Blonde but not quite blonde Alex. I met him in group therapy. My boyfriend was dead, and he had just lost his mother. We didn't label it because he had a girlfriend, and I didn't want to move on so quickly. I think we just found comfort in each other. Eventually, though, Alex became something I wanted to label. His sense of humor was a breath of fresh air. I didn't go to college because of Ben's death, settling for a mediocre barista stop in town. Alex came in every day with fresh coffee and a sugar cookie. I think I loved him. I told him that. Half asleep, I told him I wanted to try and be something more with him. Alex looked taken aback, but happy. We spent the night together. The morning after, I woke to my mother screaming. Alex was dead in the bathroom, his blood splattering, staining pristine white. According to the first responders, he died of a self-inflicted head injury. The exact same thing followed. I attended his funeral, and Alex's family disappeared. This time, I went back to his house. But according to a neighbor, his house had been abandoned for 10 years. I had eaten pancakes in his kitchen just days earlier. I broke in to see myself, but my neighbor was right. The hallway was piled with ancient mail and threats of eviction. Alex's room didn't exist. Instead, a storage room filled with boxes. When I got home, my family had already forgotten Alex's existence. The town had forgotten him, and yet his blood still stained my bathroom. Following Alex's death, I was terrified of getting too close to people. But Esme made it hard. She was my third relationship. We met at a bar. I was extremely drunk and convinced I was cursed to kill all of my romantic partners. Esme. Cute Esme. Crooked teeth and smudged lipstick and warm Esme. Do you know that person you meet and you instantly connect with them? The person you're sure is your soulmate? That was Esme. I told myself I wouldn't get close to her, but I was already talking to this girl, already pouring my life out to her. Esme sat and listened, her chin resting on her fist. She was a first-year creative writing student, and she had a cat called Peanut. I didn't remember much after that. We hit it off, and next thing I know, we're curled up in the back of her car watching Buffy on her iPad. I told her about my EXEs, and she nodded and smiled, but I don't think she was listening. I told her all of my EXEs have died, and then been erased from existence. Esm called me cute. She wanted to base a story around the concept, sitting up and grabbing her phone. I have this memory of the girl I fell in love with at first sight. She's nodding along to a Smiths song, spluttering from my car radio, typing on her phone. I can hear the tapping of her nails, her lips curving into a smile. I can see the exact moment she gets inspiration, pulling her knees to her chest. She's wearing fishnet tights that are torn and a jacket that doesn't fit her. She is fucking beautiful, and I don't want to lose her. Alex was beautiful. He had pretty eyes and brown curls that I liked running my hands through. Ben was beautiful. He made my heart swim, my stomach swarm with butterflies when I first met him. Ben was my first love. The realization woke me up one night, 3 months into dating Esm. Both of them were dead, wiped away like they never existed. And Esm would follow. At first, I tried to break it off with her without sounding crazy. I told her it was me, not her, and I wasn't in the mindset for a relationship. Esm understood, but her eyes didn't. I didn't want to lose her. Esm lit up every room she entered. Her obsession with thrifted clothes and badly written poems, and her irrational fear of pandas, made her someone I wanted to be with. So, I stayed with her. I told myself Ben and Alex were just coincidences that were nothing to do with me, and I wasn't indirectly fucking killing the people I fell in love with. I avoided the L word for as long as I could. It slipped out on my way to work. Esm was driving. I just said it, and her eyes lit up. She reached out and squeezed my hand. At work, one of my colleagues, Jasper, caught my eye. When I twisted around to ask him to grab something, I glimpsed his phone screen. It looked like Tinder, though I didn't recognize the layout. It reminded me of Twitter in dark mode. Jasper was leaning against the counter, his thumb hovering over a photo of Esm, chewing his bottom lip. I watched his thumbprints across the screen before he gave up and swiped left. Finishing up the woman's coffee, I handed it over. I asked for cream, ignoring her. I sidled in front of my colleague, hyper-focused on whatever app he was playing around with. What's that? Jasper looked up, his eyes widening, lips parting like a fucking goldfish. Clearly nothing. Jasper sidestepped me, opening the refrigerator and pulling out milk. But he already had milk. The bastard was stalling. We had 0 customers waiting, so it was the 2 of us and a long, dragged-out pause. Jumping up and down on the heels of his feet, he shot me his usual grin, slipping his phone in his apron. Jasper may have been smiling, though there was something twisted in his expression. I couldn't stop myself. Was that a dating app? Dating app? Excuse me, can I get what I ordered? The woman demanded, waving her coffee in the air. I asked for whipped cream. Jasper saw that as an excuse, and escaped and nodded, fashioning a grin. He saw an opportunity and took it. Of course, ma'am. I'll get that for you, he said with a little too much sarcasm. The boy took her coffee with a spring in his step, ducking in the refrigerator for the whipping cream. Jasper added too much whipping cream, dumping the drink on the counter with a little too much force. It was a good thing my colleague was marginally attractive guy with cropped blonde hair and a deadpan voice that somehow attracted the ladies. Jasper could insult someone directly to their face, and they would just blush and get all tongue-tied. I had seen it happen in real time. A girl was flirting with him and used a bad pickup line, which was something along the lines of, "Did it hurt when you fell from heaven?" He laughed, and her eyes brightened. She giggled along with him, nudging her friends. But he wasn't laughing with her. I saw the gleam in his eye. He was laughing at her. Still laughing, Jasper plunked her milk latte down so hard half of it spewed out. And with that exact same charming smile, he deadpanned. Did it hurt when you dropped out of a drainpipe? Yeah, my colleague was blessed with good looks. Otherwise, he would have been punched in the face by now. Presently, he was being his usual asshole self. Is there anything else I can get you? The woman shook her head, pulling a face. Jasper had, essentially, ruined her drink. It was more cream than coffee. When she left the store, I situated myself in front of him when he was counting cash. What were you just looking at? I nodded to the guy's phone sticking out of his pocket. Was it like a dating thing you were on? Jasper didn't even look at me, his lip curling. That's kinda rude, he ummed. I don't peek at your phone. Hope was all I could hiss out. Was she on the dating app? My colleague proceeded to stare at me like I'd grown a second head before his half-lidded gaze flicked behind me. Jasper's expression brightened. Oh, Hannah is calling me, he said, choking out a laugh. Hannah was not calling him. She was in the break room getting high. Jasper slowly backed away, maintaining his smile. I'll be back in a sec, all right? He grabbed that same carton of milk with a grin. Don't you just love when your milk stays fresh? What? Fresh milk? He grinned. Mulberry Farm's finest. Jasper was darting away before I could coerce a sentence. After work, I texted Esm as usual. She was my ride on Fridays. Esm didn't reply. I texted her again, a little more panicked. Hey, are you okay? When I called her, an automated voice told me she wasn't available. Already feeling sick to my stomach, I drove to her place myself. I could see the flashing lights before anything else, blurred red and blue, sending my thoughts into a whirlwind. It took me 10 minutes to muster the courage to jump out of my car and ask a pale-looking deputy what was going on. I tried to jump over the yellow tape, only to be politely pulled back. Carbon monoxide poisoning, the deputy told me. The whole family is dead, he sighed. Mom, Dad, and their daughter in college. I think he was trying to be sympathetic, awkwardly patting me. But I was already on my knees, all of the breath dragged from my lungs. Luckily, it's just like going to sleep. Monoxide is a silent killer. Monoxide is a silent killer. Was that the same as, I'm sorry? Ben was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Alex was silently suffering. He did what he thought was best. I didn't go to Esm's funeral. Mom and Dad and Will had already forgotten her, just like the others. What I did do, several days later, when her name wasn't even a memory anymore, I bought flowers from the store. Roses were Esm's favorite. The seller was around my mom's age, a plump-looking woman wearing a floral dress, long red hair tied into a ponytail. She was on her phone, humming to a tune on the radio. The Smiths. I hope she likes them, the woman said, wrapping the flowers in red ribbons. She had a strong southern accent that immediately annoyed me. I took the roses, stuffing them in my bag. What did you say? The seller cocked her head. How did you know they were for my girlfriend? The woman sighed, placing her phone on the counter. I glanced at whatever she'd been so interested in, but the screen was face down. Esm came in here a lot. Her lips broke out into a sad, sympathetic smile. I was quickly growing sick of them. Esm. She told me you guys were dating. Esm was always buying roses for her room. Sometimes she would stand in here for hours and just stare at flowers. I think she found comfort in them, the woman sighed, fixing me with what I could only describe as a pitiful pout. Aro? I hope you can find the same comfort, she murmured. The seller handed me an extra rose, and I found myself reaching out for it, my eyes stinging. Fuck. I hadn't cracked in at least 15 hours, and that was a record. But now I could feel myself splintering, tears trickling down my cheeks. The flower lady squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, sweetheart. If it makes you feel better, it's just like going to sleep. Monoxide is a silent killer. Her words were familiar. Exactly what the deputy said. Before I could speak, she dumped weed killer on the counter. Did you know our plant killer is $10.99? Her sudden bout of energy took me off guard. I tried to smile. I don't want any plant killer, the seller nodded, handing me another rose. Oh, of course, darling. But it is $5.99. Just for today. Something pricked me, and I hissed out, wafting my hand. Damn thorns. I could already see a single spot of blood. I nodded, sucking my teeth against a cry. Thanks. But I'll skip it this time. I took the roses to what used to be Esm's grave. Now it was an empty headstone with no name, no memories, no flowers, nothing. Just like Alex and Ben, Esm had been reduced to dirt under my feet. I stayed at her grave for a long time, long enough for the sky to grow dark and my thoughts darker. I tried to find a logical explanation for the sudden deaths of the people I got close to, but all I could think of was a curse. So I started Googling curses, leaning against Esm's headstone, my knees to my chest. Had I been cursed? Was my family cursed? According to Google, a cursed object connected with the curse itself, which could be anything. Though I didn't remember visiting any ancient ruins or an old church. With zero answers, I headed home. I passed a guy playing the Smiths in his car, then a group of older women wearing ripped fishnets. Esm was following me, just like Alex's smell. Fresh coffee and rich chocolate. Ben's cologne filled my car last summer. His favorite band was playing all day on our local music station. I drove around with no destination, listening to each one on repeat, until I was losing him all over again. The sweet aroma of flowers followed me all the way home, and I was tipsy on the smell when I found myself face to face with a boy. Under the overexposed streetlight, this guy was almost ethereal, thick brown hair and freckles. He reminded me of Ben, which wasn't fair. I thought I was hallucinating him before he came closer, bleeding from the shadow. I saw more of him, white strips of something wrapped around his head. Wrong. The word slammed into me when I glimpsed his clothes. Filthy. The guy was wearing a white button-down, a single streak of bright red ingrained into the material. His white pants were torn, glued to his legs. He was barefoot, the soles of his feet slapping on wet concrete. I didn't realize he was in front of me, nose to nose, until he shoved me. Hard. Josie. His voice was a whimper, despite his narrowed eyes, his lips twisted into a scowl. He was crying, and had been crying, every heaving son sputtering from his mouth. The boy shoved me again, and I staggered. His ice-cold breath grazed my cheeks. What the fuck did you do to my sister? Sister, I whispered. Something wet landed on my cheek suddenly. Rain. I wasn't expecting a downpour. The weather was forecasted to be clear. To my surprise, the guy let out a harsh-sounding laugh. The two of us were slowly getting drenched, but neither of us were making a move to get out of the rain. My hair was glued to the back of my neck, my clothes sticking to me. But somehow, I wanted to stay in the rain. It was refreshing. When a thought hit me, telling me to get out of the rain, it was shoved to the back of my mind. The guy spat water out of his mouth, shaking his head like a dog. Of course, he muttered, drown me out with the rain. I found my voice, my gaze glued to intense red seeping through the bandage stapled to his head. He looked like he'd escaped an emergency room. I don't know anyone called Josie, I said. I think you've got the wrong person. The guy's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, grabbing my shoulders, and I noticed how hollow his eyes were, empty caverns carved into his skull. Eyes are the windows to the soul, and this guy was completely soulless. I'm only going to say this once, he whispered. What did you do to my sister? Before I could respond, the guy was being violently grabbed and dragged back. Figures who appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Let me go, he cried out, struggling. You fucking holes. Let me go. His screaming became muffling when his cries were gagged. You promised, he yelled, his cries collapsing into a sob. You said if you took me, she wouldn't get hurt. So, where is she? He met my gaze, his expression crumpling, something inside him coming apart, splintering by the seams. You can't take both of us. This wasn't in the agreement. When he was dragged further back, I noticed a car parked at the side of the road. The boy was pulled inside. At first he refused, before an extra pair of hands shoved him. You fucking mamfumsum. I heard his fist slamming into the windows. Don't take me back there. Please. Just let Josie. His cries once again collapsed into angry muffled screaming, and I felt my hands moving towards my pocket for my phone. This was a kidnapping, right? I was witnessing a kidnapping in broad fucking daylight. A shadow was suddenly in front of me, and I jumped, tearing my eyes from the car. Jasper, my colleague. He was still wearing his apron, and to my confusion, was swinging a carton of whole milk. Sorry, Brie. He winked, speaking in a single breath. As you can see, our friend here had a little too much to drink. I nodded, craning my neck. Jasper stepped in front of me, maintaining a grin. Who is he? This time, I sidestepped away from him, only for him to copy. Just a guy, he said. As you can see, he's a little. Jasper prodded his right temple. Let's just say he's got a few too many screws loose. Jasper laughed, staying stock still, blocking my way. When I made a move to counter him, he stepped in front of me, his eyes hardening. I heard he lost his family a while ago in a... He pretended to think. Oh yeah, a car crash. Maybe a gas explosion. I'm not really sure. I could hear the car behind him, and once again I tried to dart past him. But he was quick to block my way. He was getting closer to me, very subtly backing me in the opposite direction. Anyway, this guy is key end of nuts. Dude still thinks he's got a sister. When I lost patience and shoved him out of the way, the car and the guy was gone. See, Jasper rolled his eyes. He was still holding milk from work. My head spun. It was 8 p.m. We were in a suburban neighborhood, and Jasper was holding half a pint of milk. His apron was stained with coffee, and when I really looked at him, I realized he was out of breath. He was doing a good job of hiding it, exhaling in intervals, swiping at his forehead to clear sweat. When I noticed, he pretended to run his hands through his hair. I feel for him. Like, I'm sorry his family died, or whatever, but attacking random girls isn't cool, you know. Instead of replying, I stumbled home. It was sunny. At 8 p.m. And when I took notice, I wasn't even wet. Esm was my last straw. I made a promise to myself to not get close to anyone. The guys and girls I met were friends, and nothing more. Weirdly enough, the only guy I was getting close to was my colleague. I don't know if it was brain damage, or I was finally losing the plot. But Jasper's shameless cruelty towards customers, and that quirk in his lips when he made them cry, was kind of hot. However, he was playing hard to get. And I mean really playing. I was in storage trying to find vegan milk, and he was suddenly a fucking expert, spewing milk facts. When I slammed the refrigerator door shut, he was inches from my face. In the dim light from a single spluttering bulb, his eyes reminded me of coffee grounds. I thought maybe he was going to kiss me, judging from his softening expression. I felt his hands go around my waist, and I felt myself immediately melt. I don't know what came over me. It's like, one minute I hated him, and the next, I was suddenly hot, really hot. And I really wanted to take my clothes off. I thought that's what he wanted to do too. I mean, his gaze followed mine, piercing, fingers playing with the buttons on his shirt. Before he leaned forward, his breath in my face. Did you know that Mulberry Farms is an award-winning brand of milk in our town and only our town? Mulberry Farms was bred and made right here, and suddenly I was no longer hot and bothered. I said, ducking into a crouch to search the shelves. Have you seen our vegan milk? We did have some 3-time winner, Jasper continued. When I jumped up, he stepped closer, and I felt my cheeks spark. His smile was rare. In fact, Jasper was only smiling when he was talking about milk. Mulberry Farms have the best pasteurization. It's suitable for everything. Coffee, cereal, or maybe you just want a glass of fresh milk to yourself. Perfect for kids, too. Breakfast time is Mulberry Farms. Are you having a stroke? I shrieked. Nope. Jasper twisted around, shooting me a grin. I left the storage, however, with butterflies in my gut. There was no way I was falling for my asshole colleague. Somehow, though, I was. Just standing next to him filled me with electricity. The way he talked down to customers, insulting me to my face. I was thoroughly and disgustingly in love. I tried to stop myself. I showered in ice-cold water. I ate choked on a ghost pepper. I even asked my brother for advice, who told me to go for it. I told him Jasper had one of several flaws, but this particular one was off-putting. He's obsessed with milk, I told my brother. Harry lifted a brow. Is that a euphemism, or? He paused, for way longer than necessary. So, your would-be boyfriend has a milk fetish. I left his room before he could take the conversation further. I wanted to say Jasper was the only one who acted weird. But over the next few weeks, I noticed it in quite a few people. I was having breakfast with Mom, and she lifted up the box. Choco Flakes, she blurted. Aren't they just the best? I nodded slowly. Yeah, Mom. They're great. I prodded the box with a smile. Only $1.99. There were so many townspeople on their phones. They walked around with groceries or briefcases, their eyes glued to whatever they were swiping through. I was serving an old woman when I caught her phone screen. I could have sworn there was an image of Jasper. She swiped right, and I had a hard time looking her in the eye. The woman was at least in her 80s, and I'm talking, can barely walk, and needs assistance. Was she seriously hitting up 25-year-old guys? Walking home, everyone was on their phones. I stopped at a crossing, stabbing the red light. It started to snow the second I stepped out onto the road, white flakes dancing in front of me. It didn't even cross my mind that it was almost June. The snow was pretty, accumulating on the ground. Oh shit, sorry. Lifting my head, a guy was standing in front of me holding an umbrella. I knew him, but not from whatever was trying to pollute my mind. I knew him from a while ago. I knew him from the rain. I knew the bloody bandages wrapped around his head and soulless, seething eyes I couldn't understand. It was the boy who was dragged away 3 months prior. He looked different. His hair was shorter, his face carved into a thing of beauty. The white strips of gauze bleeding scarlet were gone, his filthy clothes replaced with a white shirt and pants, a trench coat flung over the top. I didn't remember him being this handsome. His dark brown hair had been tamed and curled. It was his expression that sent shivers sliding down my spine. His too wide smile and unblinking eyes made me suddenly conscious of two bright lights on the two of us. So bright. Something shattered in my mind, and I was aware of a lot of things. The snow under my feet was too soft. I glimpsed a single streak of red seeping from his nose, his hands trembling around a takeout coffee cup. Behind me, people were staring. I could see a group of teenage girls giggling. "It's him," one of them squeaked. "It's the new love interest." Bree, his grin widened, snowflakes prancing around us. His teeth gritted together. I could tell he hated every word. Holy shit, long time no see. He held out his hand, and I could see visible pain contorting in his eyes. "Help me." He was screaming through a twinkling smile. "Don't you remember me? It's Sam." He laughed. "From 8th grade." The lights blinked out, and the thought crashed into my mind. Static images filling my head. I shook them away. Oh yeah, it was Sam. My childhood friend. But I didn't reply. Instead of saying, "Sam, it's been so long," I found myself walking, stumbling over to the girls, who were rapidly swiping left on their phones. "What's that?" I demanded in a sharp breath. I grabbed for the phone, only for Sam to step in front of me. He settled me with a smile. Behind me, one of the girls fainted. Sam's smile didn't waver, though he did side-eye the girl being carried away. "Why don't I take you out for coffee?" Apparently, coffee was the code word for hooking up. Sam dragged me into the nearest coffee store, straight to the bathroom. When he shoved me into a stall, I didn't know what to say. "Take off your shoes," he said in a hiss, and after hesitating, I did. Sam pulled off his jacket, shook snow out of his hair, and got real close. "Look up," he murmured. I did, my gaze finding the ceiling. "To your right, a camera is very well hidden, but can be seen with the naked eye if you catch what looks like a red laser," Sam said. "To your left, another camera, as well as a vent that is currently pumping the stalls with aphrodisiacs. And right now, we are in the red zone. Meaning, you should be conscious." He prodded me, and I flinched. Mostly conscious, his words went right over my head. My mind was foggy. I couldn't think straight. I think I asked him what he was saying, but my mouth was filled with cotton. "Snap out of it," he said. "Like I said, they're making you feel like this." He shoved me against the door, which broke me out of my trance. Slightly. "I hate what I'm going to say right now," Sam groaned, tipping his head back. He was sweating, I noticed. "Bad." I glimpsed beads of red pooling down his neck. He noticed me staring. "I'm okay for now. I'm faulty, so the connection is severed." He squeezed his eyes shut. "I think." "What are you talking about?" "Sex," he said, blinking rapidly. I wasn't going to comment on his slurring voice. Sam stumbled, fresh blood dripping from his nose. "We need to do the sex." "Like." His eyes rolled into the back of his head, but he managed to stabilize himself. "Nuau, what? Is everything okay in there?" The voice was a woman. She knocked on the stall. Sam's eyes widened, coming back to life a little. "They're paranoid," he whispered. When I could only stare at him, he pounded his fists into the door. "They think we're fucking," he hissed, "so we need to make it believable." I mouthed. He didn't reply, swiping at his hemorrhaging nose. "Just move around against the door." "That'll fool them," I did, doing my best to shuffle around, slamming my back against the lock. When the metal clanged, he shot me a look. "Sex," he hissed, "not murder." Sam jumped onto the toilet bowl. There was an open window above him. That's enough, he mouthed, hoisting his way through. He helped me through, and I expected to land on concrete. What I did land on, however, was something squishy, something wet sliding between my bare toes. Looking closer, I recognized the beaded anklet, fishnet tights. Something animalistic clawed from my throat. I was standing on Esm, or what was left of Esm. She was just a torso and legs, the rest of her ripped away like doll pieces. I couldn't see her face. I looked for it, digging through what could only be old flesh and pieces of limbs. I felt suffocated. I grabbed half of Ben's face that had been ripped off, and then Alex's tattooed arm. There was so much of them, piles and piles of the same heads, the same filthy and rotting clothes. I was screaming by the time I shuffled back on my hands and knees, trying to wipe them off of my skin. They were all over me, staining me, painting me. Sam's hand slicked with blood gently covered my mouth. "Stay calm, all right?" he whispered. "I would tell you everything is going to be okay, but the truth is, it's really not. There's like a 99.9% chance you're going to." Understandably freak out, he pulled me to my feet, letting out a heavy breath. Blinking rapidly, I could only see pieces. Pieces of people. Legs and heads and torsos all piled into one mass of gore. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before they realize we're not doing the devil's dance," Sam sniffled. "Maybe 10. Before my brain short circuits and I bleed out. I didn't know I was hyperventilating until I couldn't fucking breathe." Closer towards the door, and I could hear machinery. I couldn't stop myself. Even when I was aware I was standing in congealing blood. Rotten bodies. The dim light led me into what could only be described as a factory. There were 3 levels, and we were on the highest. Sam stepped forward, gripping the metal bar in front of us. I felt my legs buckling, a thick, pukey slime filling my mouth. "Sue, I guess it all started when Brianna Timmerman was 17 years old and rejected by her childhood best friend, Sam Thwaites." Sam's words collapsed into a low buzzing in my ear. All I could see was a conveyor belt filled with people, boys, girls, but most noticeably, Ben's, Alex's, Esm's, and Sam's. But they start as Ben's, Alex's, and Esm's. I could see regular people, their hair stripped away, their skin sliced in two, cruelly molding them into the exact same for faces. When a large looming needle plunged into the back of an Alex's head, I couldn't not watch. I waited for the guy to wake up, but I don't even think he was alive. He stood, unblinking, letting this thing twist and contort his face. And it was then, when I realized these things weren't even human. I could see the mechanics built under their flesh, both living tissue and metal melded together. Brianna's father, who is a little on the crazy side, with too much cash and not enough logic, took his daughter's rejection a little too personally. Sam continued. So, he promised his daughter he would find her the perfect match. I started to speak, the words coming out before I could stop them. "My father would never." "I didn't say it was your father," Sam said. His eyes darkened. Anyway, as I was saying, the townspeople became unhealthily obsessed with who Brianna would choose. So obsessed, in fact, that the girl's day-to-day life was broadcasted across town, while her potential love interests were ranked, week after week. First, there was Ben. Sam's smile thinned. Her high school boyfriend. Sam shrugged. She grew bored of him. Also, he kinda did something unforgivable. He continued. Then, Alex. She liked him, but sometimes he was a little too unserious. The guy was a clown. I backed away, but he was quick to grab my shoulders. Finally, Esm. Who she truly fell for, I swallowed. Esm is, He cut me off. But I didn't mention that they hurt her, did I? Sam leaned against the bar. Behind him, I could see a figure in white pushing a gurney with a Ben strapped to it. Ben tried to rape her, insisting she wanted it. Alex dumped her on her birthday. Esme ended their relationship with a one-word text. Goodbye. Sam mimed an explosion. That was the nail in the coffin. I caught blood sliding down his nose. You're still bleeding. Sam gingerly prodded his nose. A row. Yeah, it's an effect of the severing. I've been in the red zone too long. I should probably speed this up. He talked faster, his voice collapsing into a mumbled slur. Brianna couldn't take it. Her best friend was ignoring her. Everyone she had fallen in love with hurt her. Esme wasn't returning her calls. Ben was sleeping around right in front of her, and Alex was still being a clown. Brianna's poor parents found her hanging from her bedroom ceiling fan. I shook my head, my thoughts screaming. No, he held a finger up to shush me. Let me talk. Geez, Sam folded his arms. A grieving father would do anything to avenge his dead child, boot. Mr. Timberman took, finding a perfect match, and the show must go on a little bit too literally. His sickly smile found me. Which also means going stark fucking crazy. The town wanted more of Brianna and her life, so he turned his daughter's failed love life into a town-wide TV show, sending the entire teen and young adult populace into here. He gestured around him. To make the perfect suitors. Who wouldn't hurt his new Brianna? Something ice-cold crept down my spine. He cleared his throat. Mr. Timberman grew, let's say, obsessed with getting revenge on these specific 4 people. So, he started killing them. He coughed. Sorry. Us. Killing us for the funny ha-ha. Look at how many times I can fuck with them. Bit. And then recycling us into someone completely different. Our names are gone. Then our personalities. Finally, our bodies ripped to pieces and sculpted into Brianna's EXEs. Sam poked me in the cheek. The cycle continues. They reset your ticker, and the town eats it up. They can bring back Esme, Ben, and Alex whenever they want, and add curveballs. Like the bad boy colleague who becomes the fan favorite, Sam's lips curved. For some fucking reason, his eyes flickered open. However, Brianna will never find a suitor because her father is a fucking sociopath. To him in the town, his dead daughter's pathetic love life is entertainment. He held out his arm. See, I tried really hard not to look through the makeup. At noticeable skin grafts. I was a Ben, he said. Then I was an Alex, and then I was an extra. His eyes found mine sad suddenly. But who I was originally is kinda gone. All I remember is a deal to protect Josie. I gave myself up so they wouldn't take her, your sister, I said. Sam nodded. His earlier words hit me. He was talking like Brianna Timberman was dead. But I was Brianna Timberman. I was rejected by Sam, yes, but I found Ben. As if he could read my mind, Sam shook his head. Look at yourself, he said, his voice shaking. And I mean really look at yourself. Sam stepped closer. Because underneath all of that makeup and the prosthetics and surgery and fucked up memories, you're just another recycled lump of flesh. He prodded my temple. Who thinks she is Brianna Timberman? His voice was slurring again, a fresh stream of scarlet seeping down his chin. Don't you want to know? His eyes rolled to pearly whites. Before he could finish his sentence, Sam dropped to the ground. I remember warm arms grasping hold of me. Shadows with no faces. They pricked me twice in the back of my neck. A familiar voice in my ear, almost a hiss. Jasper. You are the worst fucking Brianna. When I came to, I was standing up somehow. At work. I am Brianna Timberman. The thought floated around in my head, my memory hazy. Hello? A man was waving his hands in front of me. I asked for iced coffee, lady. Jasper was serving another customer. Bree, wake the fuck up. They were trying to make me think I was hallucinating. Which was crazy, because my fingernails were still tinted with Sam's blood. The marks he'd left on my wrist when he was yanking me were still there. Bruised on my arm. Bree, Jasper snapped. Snap out of it, and make the dude his drink. Right, the words slipped out of my mouth. He caught my eye, winking, and Brianna Timberman internally squeaked. I half wondered what he was. Was he recycled, or an unwilling performer? Throughout the day, I was fully aware my words were not mine. Like I was on autopilot. But not just that. My thoughts weren't mine either. I spent half of my shift staring at my colleague's biceps. During my break, I went into the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. I am Brianna Timberman. But even when I told myself that, my eyes were too blue. My smile was too perfect. My teeth, too white. My shaking hands prodded at my face, at someone else's face. So many faces, so many skin grafts. The thought was violent, sending tremors through me. How many people was I wearing? I started to claw at my arms and legs, my face. How many fucking people had I been? I grabbed a knife and tried to slice at my face. But there was no blood. How could there be no blood? When I got home, I found my family waiting for me. Mom, Dad, and Harry, all of them beaming. Bree, Mom stood up, her lips stretching into a grin. My mouth was already moving, but they were not my words. Mom, I didn't know why she was smiling so much, until I saw Sam sitting at our dining room table. His smile was too big. His overexpensive shirt and pants did not suit him, and looked fucking gross, but somehow my brain thought it was hot. The worst part is, I couldn't and still can't tell which Sam he was. Was he the guy who told me the horrific reality of my existence? Or was he another recycled, mindless suitor? This is Samuel, Mom said, and Sam slowly stood. He took slow steps towards me and kissed my hand. I saw the slightest smudge of scarlet in his lip, but his eyes were blank. In the corner of my eye, my father's eyes were glittering. Hello, Brianna, Sam said, and I swore now that I was awake. The walls were wolf whistling. Laughing. Oh, oh, ooh, oh, ooh. My town is a blip on the map. We're so small, so insignificant. Not even a Google search will find us. I keep thinking if I tear at my skin, I will find who I am underneath. But I'm so fucking scared. I don't bleed. I don't think who I was still exists under so many layers. But even if this is just a cry into the void, please help us. I don't want to be Brianna Timberman. Story 2. I found a night shift job on Indeed. They paid me $2,000 per night to watch over a dead woman's ashes. I was getting ready to sleep when I received the call. It was from a no-caller ID. I sat there at the edge of the bed, phone to my ear. Hello? I could hear someone clearing their throat from the other end of the line. And then a deep, formal voice piped up. Good evening. Am I speaking to Alex Adiemi? You are, I answered. Who's this? I was up to my neck in cold calls from strangers who wanted to sell me car insurance and was ready to tear the caller a new one when he explained. I'm calling about the caregiver role. For Granger Manor, those words chased the sleep out of my eyes. I sat up straight. Me and my girlfriend were saving up for our wedding. But with only 10 months left, we needed every penny we could get. I needed a part-time job, and I needed one fast. But finding a good, decent job these days was like finding water in the Sahara. So it's no surprise that I applied for this caregiver vacancy 2 minutes after it went live on Indeed. We like your CV and would like to invite you for an interview, the caller continued. His voice was soft, silky smooth. So smooth, it was almost unnerving. He sounded like one of those ASMR YouTubers. Would you be free tomorrow morning? 8:30 a.m. to be exact. I didn't miss a beat. I'll be there. I never expected them to call me back half an hour after I applied. 11 at night, no less. But I just assumed they were as desperate for employees as I was to earn some money on the side. It was a match made in heaven. The interview was done over Zoom. The next morning, I sat at my dining room table, hunched over my laptop, headphones pressed into my ears as I joined the call. The video call flickered to life, and a middle-aged man appeared on my screen. He introduced himself as Damien. No surnames. Just Damien. He looked as professional as he sounded. Slicked back dark hair as black as night, well-groomed beard, suit and tie. He smiled, but if there was even a shred of warmth left in that smile, it didn't reach his pale blue eyes. The corners of his mouth were pulled back just a little too far, revealing teeth that were unnaturally even and white, as if he spent a lifetime polishing them to perfection. He asked all the usual questions. What are your weaknesses? What do you believe are the most important qualities for a caregiver to possess, and how do you demonstrate them? Why do you think you're a good fit for this company? I bullshitted my way through the interview. I asked a few questions of my own too. There were barely any traces of the care home on the internet, and I was curious about that. Damien glanced up at me. His smile never wavered, but his eyes held a flicker of something unreadable. It looked a little like surprise. Oh yes, he began, his voice measured and calm. We pride ourselves on maintaining a private and exclusive environment for our residents. Many of them prefer a more discreet approach, away from the prying eyes of the public. It sounded like he was reading from a rehearsed script. I ignored the red flags. Looking back at it, I ignored a lot of red flags. Money sometimes makes you blind. In the end, I got the job. I started work the next evening. I kissed Celine goodbye and was out the door. The place was a 45-minute drive from our house, in the ass-crack middle of nowhere. Frank Ocean sang his heart out on the car radio as I sped through the highway on a foggy night. The long road ran through the woods, and I drove past miles and miles of tall birch trees that stretched up to the cloudy sky. All around me, there was nothing but forest. The care home was nestled at the end of a quiet street in a gated community. It was a small old-school bungalow with neatly trimmed bushes and colorful flower beds on the lawn. I parked up, stepped out, and headed to the front door. Just as I raised my hand to knock, the door creaked open, revealing a tall man in the dimly lit hallway. "Good evening," Damien said, with that smooth yet hollow voice. "Alex, was it?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, that's right." I shook his hands. "Nice to meet you." Something about the man gave me unease. "Come in." He stepped aside with an almost mechanical grace. "We've been expecting you. Anything to drink? Coffee? Water?" "No, thanks." "I'm good." The door closed behind me with a soft thud. The tall man gestured for me to follow him down a narrow hallway, and with each step, the unease in my chest tightened its grip. The radio was playing softly in the background. As I listened, the crackly voice became clearer. "We interrupt our regularly scheduled programming to bring you a special report. We have just received word that Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, has been attacked by Japanese forces." I repeat, Pearl Harbor has been attacked. Damien must have noticed my curiosity. You're probably wondering why we play old news broadcasts like this one. He chimed in, his voice steady. It's not just for nostalgia's sake, although that does play a part. It's about keeping a connection to the past alive, especially for our older residents. Now that he mentioned it, the entire house looked like it was frozen in the past. The furniture in the living room matched the vintage feel. Plush armchairs with floral upholstery sat alongside polished wooden side tables. A few framed black and white photographs adorned the walls, capturing memories from what seemed like a distant past, smiling faces at family gatherings, couples dancing at social events, a little girl building a sandcastle, a slender ballerina posing on her tiptoes. Even the light fixtures with their frosted glass shades seemed to belong to another era. The soft, dim glow they poured into the room added to the cozy, yet eerie atmosphere. It looked how you'd expect an old people's home to look. There was only one thing missing. Where are all the residents? I thought out loud. Damien stopped abruptly. Apart from the ticking of the grandfather clock on the wall and the crackle of wood from the fireplace, there was no sound apart from the news reporter on the radio. He turned to me with that signature smile that was stitched onto his face, his eyes pale as snow. I must inform you that the nature of this role is quite unique. He cleared his throat. Alex, you see, the resident you will be providing companionship to is not a living person. Say what? The words caught in my throat. The individual in question is not alive. Well, at least not in the conventional sense. You will be tasked with watching over their ashes, he went on. This is an afterlife care agency. We care for those whom society had forgotten. Those who passed away with a dying wish to be remembered and loved from beyond the grave. Many of our clients are folks who died alone, with no one in their lives. No living husbands or wives, no children, no friends to mourn their losses. As he spoke, my gaze drifted to a corner of the room where a small ornate urn rested on a side table. It dawned on me that the client in question was the pile of cremated ashes in that urn. We're understaffed at the moment, so we've had to outsource some of our work across the country. It's a rather unconventional responsibility, I understand. So, if this isn't what you were expecting, it's perfectly. I was on my way to the door before he even finished his sentence. Oh, hell no. The pay would be $2,000 per night, he added, stopping me in my tracks. We've already wired this night's pay to your account. I pulled out my phone and saw the PayPal notification signaling that $2,000 had landed safely in my account. I don't even know they got my account details. That's how I started looking after Miss Ferguson's ashes. Damien explained that Miss Ferguson had died of a brain aneurysm. Right on that chair, he pointed. 3 weeks had passed before anyone noticed. The mailman came to deliver a letter one morning, and when he saw the unopened letters flooding the mailbox and smelt the stench of rot, he alerted the police. And there they found her body slumped on that chair. No one was named in her will. Her only request was for her savings to be invested into her afterlife care, and for her ashes to be scattered at a beach. And so here we were. There were rules that I had to follow each night. Damien handed me a document that listed them all. Rule 1. Ensure all doors and windows are securely locked by midnight. Do not open until the end of shift. No exceptions. Rule 2. If you hear the sound of crying, remain perfectly still until it passes. Do not, under any circumstances, make a sound. Rule 3. Do not sleep on the job. Rule 4. Do not look into any mirrors after midnight. Rule 5. Do not open the bedroom door at the end of the hallway. You must not under any circumstances break these rules, Alex, Damien finished. For the first time, the smile faded from his face. He was dead serious. Got it, I said. My schedule was the same each night. I polished the tables, vacuumed the carpets, dusted the bookshelves, and played Miss Ferguson's favorite songs on the record player. She apparently loved jump blues music, so every night I played Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy back to back. For the most part, it was a decent job. I had no supervisor, so sometimes I just laid on the couch, watching Joe Rogan until sunrise. Then I'd clock out at a.m. Rinse, repeat. I didn't hear the sound of crying until the fourth night. I was in the house all by myself. I remained as still as a mannequin, my heart beating in my chest, frozen, paralyzed by fear as I heard the sobbing. Sure, Damien did warn me about the crying, but I didn't expect it to actually happen. I strained my ears to listen, but the sound was faint and muffled, like it was coming from inside the walls themselves, almost as though they didn't want anyone to hear. But then the crying got louder and louder, and then it was followed by the sound of scratching, nails scratching furiously from inside the walls. That was the last straw. As soon as the crying stopped, I got up out of there. I left the house keys under the doormat. My phone was ringing up a storm as I reversed out of the driveway. Damien must have been alerted that the door was opened. I put it on loudspeaker and pressed the gas pedal to the floor. "What are you doing, Alex?" There was no more politeness in Damien's voice. "I'm quitting. Don't worry, I'll pay back tonight's wage. But I've entertained this crazy shit long enough. Mr. Adiemi, you're making a mistake. Listen, I'm not spending one more night in that madhouse. There are rules. You broke them. Please don't call me again. Mr. Adiemi, I urge you to." I hung up the phone. When I finally stepped through my front door, the familiar warmth of home began to ease my nerves. I collapsed to sleep on the sofa. Later that morning, I stirred awake to the sound of soft footsteps. Celine was already up by 7 in the morning, her eyes full of concern as she gently shook my shoulder. "Hey," she said, her voice a soothing balm. "You okay? You look like you barely slept." She handed me a cup of coffee. I rubbed my eyes and managed a tired smile. "Rough night," I admitted, the memories of the care home still fresh in my mind. She frowned, worry etched across her face. "You don't have to keep pushing yourself so hard," she said, kissing me on my forehead. "We can figure things out together." I know. I reached for her hand. "I just want everything to be perfect for us. It already is, as long as we're together." She squeezed my hand and smiled gently. "Just had my performance review. Been pushing for that senior product manager role. If I get it, it'll make things a little easier for us." "That's great, babe." "I know you'll get it." She probably noticed how distracted I was. "You sure you're okay, Lex?" From that point forward, I heard nothing more from Damien. No text messages, no calls. Radio silence. The job posting was no longer live on Indeed, and I didn't have the man's number, so calling him wasn't an option. I wanted to clear the air, to make sure he wouldn't break into my house one night and slip cyanide in my coffee. The silence was killing me. The uncertainty, the dread of not knowing what he was thinking. I drove back to Miss Ferguson's house, but there was no one there. Someone had stuck up a "for sale" sign on the lawn. It was as if the whole ordeal had never happened. 4 nights that were blotted out of history. Life went back to usual for the most part. At that point, I hadn't told Celine what had happened. Not about the special requirements of the job, the weird rules, or the muffled crying I heard from inside the walls. I didn't want to worry her. She had enough on her plates. Everything would go back to normal, I convinced myself. I was wrong. One morning, as I got up to brush my teeth, I glanced in the mirror and saw the reflection of an old lady standing behind me. I spun around and saw no one there. But when my eyes drifted back to the mirror, there she was again. impossibly thin and frail, draped in a tattered nightgown, leaning on a cane. Her eyes were red and teary. She had been crying. At the office, I'd see her lithe frame in toilet mirrors. Her silent eyes were now dead, as though she had run out of tears. There she was in the corner of my bedroom at night, her silhouette lurking in the dark, walking aimlessly, drifting at the corner of my eyes. But when I looked directly at her, she'd vanish again. Everywhere I went, I'd hear the tap, tap, tap of that cane as she followed me. But she was invisible to everyone else. It didn't take long for me to start losing my appetite. I ate less. My eyes became sunken, hollow from the sleepless nights. I lost some weight, and my face was gaunt. I stopped going to the office because I was terrified. I locked myself in my house and hid under the covers. That was the only place I was safe from her. I had no choice but to confess everything to Celine. She did what she could to support. She set up appointments with a therapist, stayed awake with me after my night terrors, took time off work to be around more. But still, I drifted slowly into the deep end of madness. We ended up canceling the wedding. But the torture didn't stop there. Soon I began seeing Miss Ferguson's urn in random places too. I stepped into my bedroom one evening, and there it was, sitting on my nightstand as if it had always been there. Each time I found it, I tried to get rid of it, moving it to the attic, locking it in the basement, even throwing it out with the trash. But no matter what I did, it always returned, undisturbed and pristine. And if it wasn't the urn haunting me, it was the old lady with that cane of hers. Maybe she's trying to tell you something, Celine suggested one night. We were laying on the sofa together as I ran my hand through her hair. Miss Ferguson was staring at us from the corner of the room. I tried to ignore her. Is she here with us now? Celine asked. Yeah, she's right there. I pointed to beside the dining room table. I could see that made Celine uneasy. She shifted slightly, her body tensing. Perhaps she just needs something to be at peace, Celine added, her eyes lingering on the corner of the room. Perhaps I was suddenly reminded of Miss Ferguson's will. She wanted her ashes to be scattered at a beach. I might have an idea that following morning, I stepped out of my front door for the first time in what felt like an eternity. I squinted at the blinding sunlight, feeling the fresh morning breeze on my face. It was a 50-mile drive to the closest beach. The open road stretched out ahead, winding through coastal towns and past towering cliffs laced with wildflowers swaying in the gentle breeze. Miss Ferguson's urn was riding shotgun on the front seat. The world outside my car seemed to slow down. You have a lot of time to think about everything when you're out on the road. And that whole journey, all I could think about was Miss Ferguson. I had so many questions. What did she do for a living? Did she have any children? Was she ever married? Why did she want her ashes to be scattered at the beach? I never cared to ask Damien any of these questions, but all of a sudden, these things seemed to hold more weight, more value. Finally, the beach appeared in the distance, a stretch of sand bordered by rugged cliffs and soft waves. I parked the car and stepped out onto the sand, the grains warm beneath my feet. The wide ocean stood before me, stretching into the distance forever. The sun was still climbing over the horizon. I hired one of the small boats from the fishermen and paddled it out until I was far out in the calm waters. I sat there for a moment with Miss Ferguson's ashes. It was quiet out there. Nothing but the lapping of the waves, the faint cries of the seagulls above, the breeze of the wind. All you wanted was to be cherished by someone. I said to no one in particular. Then it all hit me. All of my emotions collided like a car speeding into oncoming traffic. The fear, the sleepless nights, the confusion, the numbness, all of it mingled with a deep sense of sadness. The sadness I felt for Miss Ferguson. For all the years she felt alone, isolated, forgotten. Tears fell from my eyes before I realized I was crying. With trembling hands, I opened the urn. "I'm sorry. It must have been so lonely, so painful," I said. "But this isn't where you belong. You can let go. You can find peace now." I scattered her ashes into the sea, and as I watched it drift away, I felt a heaviness lift off from my shoulders. I never saw Miss Ferguson again after that.